All right, everybody, on behalf of Trident Title, Performance Title, and Synergy Title, I want to welcome you guys back to Better Call Paul. Today, we're going to talk about leasebacks. These are something that in the past was really not that popular, but with the crazy market that we're in and people having the age-old fear of not knowing where they're going to go when they sell and not wanting to be homeless and all that fun stuff, we're seeing them pop up more and more, so we wanted to talk about them. So, Paul, if you can give us a little idea what a leaseback is, what they have to fill out on the contract, and really most importantly, the way to structure it correctly, safely, what they have to look out for, pitfalls, do we need renter's insurance, what happens with the new buyer, a mortgage, all that fun stuff, and then we'll ask away.
Sure. Well, you hit all the highlights. If you have a lender, most of them will turn back to you and say, if you're getting this as a primary residence, some will say they need occupancy at closing. Others will say, we'll give you 30 days. Nobody will allow you more than 90 days. And it can cause a real problem. So number one is, if you have a lender, you've got to speak to them in advance before even agreeing to anything like that. And the downside is the lender will say, okay, I'm not doing the loan. And/or they'll say, I'll do it as an investor rate because you're renting the property. So that can have some pretty disastrous impact. Then there's an absolute need for the seller to have a renter's policy in place for their personal property and for their liability coverage. You want to make sure that they're indemnifying you for any liability associated with their occupancy. If their niece comes onto the property and slips and falls or drowns in the pool or whatever else it is, you're going to get sued. You're the owner of that property at that time, period. So the liability associated with that is significant. You can get liability indemnification from the seller, but that's just for them. And you've also got to get an indemnity for third-party liabilities, and you want to get them to have insurance at whatever amount you feel comfortable.
Really, the insurance has to be on both sides, right? So the people that are the sellers, which now become the tenants, they're getting renter's insurance to cover themselves against anything crazy that the new, now the new owner does. And then, of course, like you said, the new buyer, they're not getting homeowners insurance based on primary, really. They're getting homeowners insurance based on it being an investment property, even if it's for whatever, 30, 60, 90 days.
Really, the homeowner buys it for the year and usually gets a regular homeowner's policy. And then they ask the seller to get a tenant policy. But yeah, I mean, the seller can't keep their homeowner's insurance on the property once they sell, period. They're just not allowed to. Yeah, all interesting stuff.
Yeah. So what kind of pitfalls come up with this on the contract? Because, we're seeing this all the time. And now with the question that people always ask, but, it's hardest now. I know I'm going to sell my home. If I put it on the market, I'm going to sell it in 15 minutes. And then, oh my God, where am I going to go? I don't have cash, or, I'm not going to compete. What if I'm homeless? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I mean, the tough thing is, what happens if they don't get out? And what happens if they get out and on the way out the door, they drop their chest of drawers on the marble floor, and now you've got three cracked tiles in the middle of your front entryway. You've got to replace all of the front entryway, not just the three cracked tiles. Does that match with the living room or whatever rooms adjoining the front entryway? These could be a $10,000, $30,000, $50,000 issue, depending on the house. So how much security deposit are you going to hold to make sure that they vacate on a timely basis? Nobody wants to hold anything on the seller side. They, oh, we're good for it. We've got insurance. You can make a claim against your insurance company.
I think that's the most popular thing. People are saying, oh, we'll be fine. We don't need to do a lease, or we don't need any kind of documentation that we're here. We'll be out as soon as we buy the new house. And that's a great point. Security deposit, you have to treat this as a tenant, not as I'm being nice and letting the sell. Even that's what you're doing. If you're letting them stay, great, but it has to be treated as a tenant.
This is a tenancy, and even if it it's a post-occupancy agreement, I always put in, the parties shall have all rights under Chapter 83 of the Florida Landlord Tenant Act.
So are you
So-
suggesting them to write a short-term lease, almost like a seasonal or
Yes.
something like that to
Yes.
ensure it?
Without question.
Okay.
Without question, it's got to include all the basic terms. It's got to have security deposit, it's got to have term, it's got to say that your security deposit is lost if you don't vacate on a timely basis in the condition it was in at the closing. There's so much risk, and if it's a short-term lease, remember, if it's for less than 6 months and a day, you also have to collect 13%
Tax.
tax. Due.
I think that's where so many of these things are just going wrong and getting sloppy, and then they end up coming to you or seeking advice, and it's already kind of too late.
And most of the time, they don't get caught. But if they do get caught, it's interest and penalties and a problem. The other problem I'm having now is with HOAs. I
Because
just
they're
had
not
a call.
disclosing that they're going to be in there as a renter, and they're feeling, oh, I shouldn't have to because I already live here, or
They say it's a tenancy. You're not allowed to rent your property out for a year after closing. What are you doing renting it out? On day one, you're in violation. Get these people out. Yeah.
and the previous seller is saying, well, I live here, it's fine, they're not going to do anything, right? They're
Yeah. Previous seller saying no, and the other party saying, okay, it's $1,000 fine. It's $100 a day for 10 days,
pay it.
and it's $1,000. Pay it, or we'll file a lien against your property.
Yeah. Interesting. So when agents are doing these deals, I know in the past we've always kind of, I'm not sure if you have, but we've always almost coached against this and just said, look, try to make this last resort because it just gets sloppy and messy and not fun pretty much every time. But now that it's just happening more, is there certain things you want to see on the contract or that covers the agent and the seller, to make sure that if it's going to happen, because we know it's going to happen with or without us now, how do we do it right?
Yeah. So I always put on the contract itself, just tell them to put the parties shall agree on a mutual, on a short-term lease within the inspection period.
Got it. That's
Now,
a good idea.
I know by agents don't want to do that because it gets to a guy like me, and then it goes to somebody else on the other side, and it takes 7 days to work up a lease because everybody's saying, who's going to pay the sales tax?
Yeah.
Who's going to pay the bed tax? Who's going to pay for the tenant insurance? I didn't know I needed to get any. Well, I want to hold $25,000 in escrow. There's no way we're holding $25,000 in escrow. We'll give you $2,000 in escrow. $2,000 in escrow doesn't take care of, you leaving on time. So it's just a lot of back and forth, and it's not as easy as what everybody thinks it is.
Makes sense.
Yep.
So any tips or words of advice that you say? Is it just don't do them, or is it what's the parting thought on that?
Yeah, I prefer to give the seller the right to extend the closing date for a period of up to 60 days. Let it be their risk. Let them pay the real estate taxes, the HOA, the condo fees, the special assessments that come up. They want to extend out the closing date, let them extend out the closing date. But, as of the closing, let's have them leave the property and the new people come in.
Makes sense. Anybody, any questions on leasebacks? Go ahead, jump in.
Oh, this is all eye-opening stuff. A lot of stuff I wasn't aware about, and a lot of times, like they're coaching you. Because a lot of people are resisting selling right now because of that issue. They don't know what they're going to find, how long it's going to take. So I was wondering, what do you suggest? But now you said to not actually do a lease back, but extend the closing date. So that is the best and only option, really.
Yeah, I mean, look, the lease back is something that you could do. If the seller's concerned about it, they need to be understanding and appreciative of the fact that there are other concerns that a buyer is going to have, legitimate concerns, and they need to be prepared to address those concerns.
Right.
But I would try to get the seller to say, you know what? I'm sure you're going to find something. I'm sure you're already looking, and I'm happy to go looking with you this weekend to find you something great. But just in case you don't find something immediately, why don't we give you the right to extend the closing date for a period of 60 days? And see if that's the easiest way to go forward. And
Okay.
if they absolutely say no and you can't agree, then you can start heading down this path, but know that it's a risk, you know?
Okay,
Makes
thank
sense.
you.
Anybody else, anything before we sign off? All right, gang, Monday at 11, we're doing 3 ways to increase lead conversion. Next week, we are doing what you need to know to work with divorces, divorce disclosures, what you need to know for divorce clients. So we will see everyone next week. And if you need any lease backs, or if you need to work on any lease backs, get in touch with us and I will get you connected to Paul. Paul, thanks as always.
See you guys.
See you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Yeah, Ryan, do you do any of these